morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Now, as we already know, more and more women are going to the movies these days, which has had an effect not only on the box office, what dominates both domestically and worldwide, but what types of movies are getting made. But as you'll see from today's top two stories, it's also beginning to affect the industry in other ways. And growing is difficult, that's why there are growing pains, and you can decide if you think today's stories are positive growth or more in the pain category. So the first story, interestingly to me, addresses an issue that's been ongoing for quite some time in the comic book community. But now that comic book films are moving into the mainstream with movies, fascinatingly, it looks like some change might finally be coming about. So the headline reads, Women complain about sexist DC merchandise, and here's the new headline, DC listens. Yes, quite a number of people are upset about a new t-shirt that came out from one of the many licensees that DC lets use their, or licensors I guess, let's use their characters. And it was taken some of the new art from the New 52, which featured Superman and Wonder Woman about to kiss. And the t-shirt read, "Score, Superman saves the day again," or Superman does it again. And a lot of people took offense to that, namely women, of course. This actually reminds me of the Family Guy Simpsons crossover from Sunday. I'm actually going to reference that in the third story today too, but that was a great episode. It had a lot of funny things in it, and I highly recommend you check it out if you didn't. It was on Sunday, but it's on demand now for Fox On Demand. But the reason I bring that up is at the beginning of the episode, they had something about women complaining about sexist jokes, and particularly one woman said, "Oh, well, I didn't think it was funny at all, and I have a great sense of humor." And just the way they depicted it clearly was to show, well, you have an inability to laugh at it, even to laugh at yourself. And that's really a fine line. And I think if you were to ask any woman, they would agree that it's a really murky gray area as to when you cross the line of being too, going too far with a joke. Because, I think everybody would like to think they could take a joke. But anyway, that's not all. So people are upset about that Superman shirt. Then there's apparently a shirt that says, "Training to be Batman's wife," which I would agree that one goes too far. The Superman one doesn't quite offend me. Actually, it doesn't offend me at all, the Superman one. The Batman training to be Batman's wife, especially when there are so many great female Batman characters, and also Batman, you're going to be training for a long time, because we all know that Batman's not going to get married. So the shirt also doesn't make any sense. So there was anger about that. And then it moved over into something that's quite common with female comic book apparel, and that's "I only date superheroes," etc. So DC, because for some reason this time, they said, you know what, we're going to really take a hard look, a strong look at our licensors and see if they're maybe using our product irresponsibly. And that is, it might seem like a small thing if you're not in the comic book community, but if you're in the comic book community, that's huge. This has been a common complaint for years from a lot of female fans. For instance, when I was at Marvel, I hosted a Women of Marvel panel, and I had a female audience member say, "I really don't like the shirts that are available to us." And she was complaining about it, and she said, "I've actually taken to making my own shirts." And she had one on, it was really nice. And I was very honest with her, and I said, you know what, Marvel has absolutely no control over the shirts that are made, that come out from these licensors, so there's nothing we can really do about it, but your shirts are great, and you should go up to who's in charge of licensing. And I offered to introduce her after the panel, and she came over to the booth, and I did, to who was in charge of licensing, and be a force for change, be a force for good, make the good shirts. And I guess that would still be my advice. Someone must be buying "I only date superheroes" apparel, because they wouldn't keep making it. The Batman wife shirt is new, but I think that any female fan will tell you in the comic book community, we've seen a lot of those type of shirts of "I only date superheroes," etc. And as I said, again, they must sell. So I think that if people want to see change, they need to get out there and create competing merchandise, and then be able to point to sales numbers and say, look, everybody does want my shirt more. You can make more money making my shirt. Because at the end of the day, the person selling these t-shirts at Comic-Cons and comic book stores, they're trying to make a political statement. They're trying to make money. They're not like, I could carry a shirt about "I want to grow up and be Batgirl," but nobody, but I don't want to, because that's against, my worldview. I think everyone should be Batman's wife. No one's saying that. If the shirt sold, they would sell it. Now, maybe it hasn't occurred to any of these licensors to make that kind of shirt because they don't think there'd be an audience for it. So someone needs to prove the opposite. But it also just echoes the change that was going on with the Gamora merchandise kind of like mini scandal as well, where women were very upset for the lack of Gamora merchandise coming out of Guardians of the Galaxy. And the question has to be, well, if there was the merchandise, would you go and buy it? Did you buy all the Gamora merchandise that you could find? Disney, of course, would make more if they were selling out of, they're like, well, what's selling? And they're like, the Gamora stuff, we can't keep it on the shelves. They'd be like, well, then we need to make more. But that didn't happen. A lot of people just complained about it. So I think it's a really interesting space, and it continues to be a murky situation. But I'm curious to what you guys think of it. Do you think those shirts are harmful? I don't buy comic book shirts anymore, so I can't really vote in this whole situation. But what do you think of DC agreeing to take a stronger look at this? I'd be like, you know what, DC? Forget your shirts. I would prefer that you didn't cancel your comic book, animated series that had strong female characters because you think that they don't sell. But at the same time, look what's happening to Korra. I think that at the end of the day, you can't just write a complaining article on the web. Female fans need to put their money literally where their mouth is. So that's the first story of the day. Now, and we'll see how this changes as more women become a bigger part of the comic book audience. 44% of the Guardians of the Galaxy audience was female, and just how and more female superheroes come to the big screen, like Wonder Woman. That could be a huge mess if DC ever does decide to make an actual Wonder Woman movie. I mean, talk about, they could really step in it. All right, so that's the first story of the day. Now, the second story of the day is that Twilight is back. Yes, it can't die. It's as eternal as Edward Cullen. We'll see. I don't really know if Twilight can rally back, especially because I think the young adult phenomenon has moved on from that. We have our dystopian futures with Hunger Games and Maze Runner, and now we're moving also into the Weepies with The Fault in Our Stars. I think that the supernatural romance, I think that phase is over. But Twilight is going to see if they can change that and stay alive with this interesting initiative. So I'm going to tell you my thoughts on it afterwards, but let me just set it up. And then you can also form your own thoughts before I share mine. So what are they doing? Twilight's going to hold a short film competition, but it's for women only. And it's going to take place exclusively on Facebook. And they're doing it, now the press release said, partnering with the prestigious Women in Film organization. And I was like, I have never heard of the Women in Film organization. Not when I was in film school, not covering, movie news for, a couple of years at this point, and I've never heard of this organization until today. So I guess for them, this partnership is a good idea. So anyway, that's going to only appear on Facebook, and the idea is it'll be a multi-phase contest. My guess is they're going to ask people to vote on Facebook for their favorite films, which I actually have to say I am not a fan of that, because social media is a very different audience than your movie-going audience. It doesn't always translate. Just ask Scott Pilgrim and Samuel L. Jackson with Snakes on a Plane. And I think that, it creates, it's like almost like with stand-up comics. If you've ever tried to get into stand-up comedy, you can only get on stage if you bring a lot of people to sit in the audience. That's one of the reasons Jamie Foxx said he was able to build a career. He always rolled like 30 people deep. And I'll tell you from my comedy experience, performing live comedy, if you have 30 people you can put in the audience, you're going on stage. It doesn't matter if you're horrible. But of course, Jamie Foxx isn't horrible. So anyway, you have to vote apparently on these these short films from at least 5 female filmmakers, and it's going to try and be something that goes through to the #1 movie and keep people interested. We'll see. I mean, also, as I said, Twilight, there are no new Twilight books. They're trying to do some kind of Twilight encyclopedia, which is also supposed to be being promoted by this. But we'll see if people are really going to be able to stick with something for that long. But I have to say, the judges they've assembled are not only impressive, but surprising. So this is the women who will be judging these short films by women on Twilight. Which, by the way, talk about stereotypes. I think a lot of female filmmakers would be interested in making something beyond Twilight. And if they're going to succeed in Hollywood, I think they have to move beyond, the stereotypes of what a female filmmaker would depict. But anyway, one step at a time. So who are the judges? Well, of course, Stephenie Meyer, author of Twilight, is going to be a judge. Then, here's a surprise, Kristen Stewart will be a judge. I'm really surprised she's sticking with the Twilight phenomenon. You'd think she'd want to try and move away from that. She hasn't been that successful moving away from it, so maybe she's like, you know what, maybe Twilight and I should stay friends. So she's going to be there. Here's an even bigger surprise, Catherine Hardwicke is going to be a judge. You might remember she was the director of the first Twilight before it became a huge hit and was fired for the second film, and she did a pretty good job. And she's, of course, not a successful female filmmaker, I would say, but one of some renown. She's well known and respected in the industry. So I can see why she'd be there judging female filmmakers, but for her to come back to a franchise that very, publicly and unceremoniously dumped her is surprising. Then we've got 2 Oscar winners, Kate Winslet and Octavia Spencer. Then Frozen's Jennifer Lee, that's the writer from Wreck-It Ralph who came on to write and co-direct Frozen. Big Disney name now, big Disney talent, kind of like, I guess you could say almost like their new Glenn Keane, one of the few people behind the scenes at Disney Animation that I think has some name recognition. She's going to be a judge. Then Julie Bowen from Modern Family, she's Claire. And then Women in Film President Kathy Schulman. But that is like an amazing lineup of judges. As I said, I'm both impressed and surprised. So how do I feel about this? Well, I never like a competition that excludes a group. I think it's not fun, and I think that it just creates feelings of animosity. And also, it's kind of like, single-sex schools. I think you need to learn to compete in the actual environment you're going to be in. Now, some people swear by single-sex schools, so no offense to them. But, the real world is mixed, and when you go into Hollywood, you're going to have to compete with male filmmakers for jobs. So I think for women to continually need, these training wheels is disappointing. So this just seems, to almost like more of a step back than a step forward to me personally. I guess it's great to encourage female filmmakers. There are almost none of them these days, certainly not at a major level. I think Catherine Bigelow is really the only one, and she hasn't been able to maintain it. The momentum that she had off of The Hurt Locker just, hasn't stuck around in my opinion. So I'm curious to what you think. Is this a good idea? Is it a not great idea, but we'll take it? Or do you think it's actually harmful? I'm somewhere between the last two. I would just like to see a film competition that encourages everybody to enter. And then you have a real fear that, when you start going after, and I'm all for, equal representation, but don't forget that equal representation means for everyone. You can't just then take the group that originally had all the, the domination, I guess you could say white males, and then totally kick them out. That's not any better. You need to have everybody in the same, pot, and I really feel that you should excel based on the quality of your work, not your gender or the color of your skin. All right, so that's the second story. Now the third story, let's go back to that Family Guy Simpsons crossover. Of course, one of the big stars was Stewie. I'm a big Stewie fan. I love Stewie, and I thought the way he interacted with Bart Simpson was a lot of fun. But DreamWorks Animation, there's some casting news on a new project they're putting together, and it seems to me like a Family Guy ripoff. I don't see how they can do basically their own Stewie. So what's going on here? Well, it's going to be called Bossy Baby, and Alec Baldwin's going to voice a baby with a briefcase. And I'm like, that's Stewie. And I guess there's like Baby Herman from Roger Rabbit, of course, but I don't know. I think Alec Baldwin doing a baby to me just seems like so repetitive of Stewie, who's still, I think, at the top of his game. It's not even cyclical, that I would question, if I was a DreamWorks Animation exec, I'd be like raising my hand in that pitch meeting and being like, are we really going to rip off Family Guy? Because that's like their biggest character. Does he have a dog? Well, he doesn't have a dog in Bossy Baby. He has an older brother, 7-year-old brother, who's very jealous of his new younger brother because not only, is there the natural jealousy that sometimes exists between siblings when a new one arrives on the scene, but also because this new brother, this new baby brother is so competent. So his older brother is jealous and tries to, move against him. But in doing so, he ends up uncovering apparently the sinister plot by the CEO of Puppy Co., who will be voiced by Kevin Spacey. I actually kind of wish Alec Baldwin and Kevin Spacey would just guest star as, other babies on Family Guy and interact with Stewie and have maybe a Stewie movie. That would be much more interesting to me. And also, DreamWorks Animation has a distribution deal with Fox, so I don't know why they're on the phone with Seth MacFarlane anyway, saying, can we have Stewie or want to work with us and make an animated movie? We've got Alec Baldwin and Kevin Spacey. But anyway, so Kevin Spacey plays the CEO, and when they discover that, when the older brother discovers this plot, he and his baby brother, the bossy baby, must work together to stop Kevin Spacey. So the only silver lining is that the person who's set to direct this is Megamind director Tom McGrath, and I love Megamind. I just watched Megamind, I'd say about a month ago on demand. It was so amazingly good, and I would much rather that Tom McGrath worked on Megamind 2. But that's never going to happen, unfortunately, because it just didn't perform well enough at the box office. But I do think he's very good, and I thought he did a wonderful job, this director, Tom McGrath, of really capitalizing on a lot of stereotypes, and cliches in the superhero genre, and commenting on them in a fresh, interesting way that hadn't been done before, which is hard because there's been a lot of self-reflection in the comic book industry. So maybe he can apply that to this, but I think he really has his work cut out for him, not seeming like a ripoff of Stewie. But I'm curious, would you watch this? And also DreamWorks Animation, what's going to happen with that company? That Japanese deal, by the way, from the weekend fell through. They're actually considering, Japan SoftBank is actually considering buying a stake in Legendary now. So DreamWorks, they're kind of floundering. They would like to become private again, but nobody wants to purchase them. That's how bad they look in their portfolio. It's just, I think that ripping off Family Guy is not a great thing to add to this really bad storm that's developing over at DreamWorks Animation. All right, so those are the 3 stories of the day. Now, the viewer question comes from Matthew Grant, and Matthew's been very persistent in getting his question answered, which I appreciate. That he understands that it's hard to get sometimes for me to see every question. Actually, when he asked it this time, this is the first I'd ever seen it. If you don't get a question in within the first 24 hours of an episode, it's unlikely that I'll see it. But he kept trying, and he was very nice about it. So today, Matthew, I'm going to answer your questions. Thank you very much. So Matthew Grant says, "Hi, Grace. Studio ADI is a makeup and creature special effects company that's run by a couple of guys who used to work for Stan Winston. They have put together a Kickstarter to fund their own movie that has 100% practical creature effects with no computer generation effects on the creature creations itself. So it's totally practical effects. That's what Studio ADI is trying to put together. They got more than they needed, so that's great. Their Kickstarter page was a success. How awesome is that?" But Matthew continues saying, "They were working on a lot of stuff for this newer The Thing movie, but sadly all their stuff was pretty much cut out and replaced with CGI because the producers felt it seemed more like an 80s or 90s horror movie." And Matthew says, "Well, duh, that's the point." So the movie they are making is called Harbinger Down, and Matthew says the trailer is up, so I put a link in the video description to the trailer if you want to check out what Studio ADI is doing. And he continues saying, so this is Matthew's question. He says, he's wondering, what's your take on practical versus CGI creature effects? And what is your favorite monster movie of all time? Thanks, Grace. He says he'll see me when he gets home from work. So I hope you had a great day at work today, Matthew, and today your question will be answered. So I'm going to do it in 2 parts. So the first one, I guess I'll start with my favorite monster movie, and I'd have to say, surprisingly, it's the most recent Godzilla. I really like the monster design there. I thought the Muto looked really cool. I thought that Godzilla looked great, and I thought the end fight, obviously, where Godzilla takes down that Muto with his breath, his like atomic breath, was really amazing. And I thought the characters were so well realized and genuinely scary, but you couldn't look away because of the creature design. I really enjoyed it. Even though the movie itself had a lot of problems structurally, I thought that the creature design couldn't get any better. So I'm actually excited for continuing with Godzilla 2 and all of Legendary's kaiju films like Skull Island. Pacific Rim, that was a little too fantastical for me, but the more realistic ones like Godzilla and Skull Island, I'm very curious to see what they do next. And I am interested because I did like the way the monsters were realized in Godzilla 2014. So that's my favorite monster movie. I guess I also like Jaws quite a bit, but to me that's not so much a monster movie in the traditional sense. But what do I prefer? Practical or CGI special effects? Well, I think it really needs to be a mix. I don't think that CGI effects will ever go away, but I appreciate the move to practical effects, like for instance that we're seeing the upcoming Star Wars. Now, when should you go CGI? When should you go practical? Well, I think you should go practical when you can build like a puppet, for instance, and I think that works very well in Star Wars. But also I'm saying practical in like, the sets that you build. I don't like when things go totally green screen. They're like, well, just put the actor in there. Or maybe sometimes just a stunt body person's double, then I'll CGI their face on there, and it's just like a composite. And you're like, what am I looking at? It's not so great. I don't like that so much. But I do have to say, Matthew, that I'm sorry to say, that I side with the producers on The Thing, that you don't want your movie to look like it's an 80s or 90s film. I think that while there's a small fan base, a cult fan base that would love that, like yourself, and obviously the people who work at Studio ADI, I think that overall if you want to get a lot of people going to see your movie, to make them feel it's worth paying to see on the big screen, it needs to look like it can compete with the other films that are out there. And I think a throwback to the days of practical special effects, like Gremlins or American Werewolf in Paris or London, I just don't think that it works out. I think people are going to feel it's too old school, it's too on demand, too rental, too streaming. It's not something worth seeing at the highest price. So that's really where I have to draw the line. I'd say if you can get the practical effects to where they look like they compete with the CGI and it just looks more real because we're actually able to interact with it, great. Otherwise, I'm going to have to go CGI. And I hope that people who do CGI special effects work their way to a point where they can dial it back so it does seem more real with what they're accomplishing. But I'm curious what everybody else thinks. Where do you stand on the battle between practical and CGI special effects? Do you want to mix like myself? And if so, where do you think the line is between practical and CGI? Do you want to go all CGI? You want to see what those wizards can do? I mean, if you watch some of the Industrial Light and Magic demo reels they launch for award season, they're amazing. Like the climactic battle with the Avengers all on that bridge on Park Avenue in front of Grand Central Station, the wide shots, CGI stunt doubles, and you can't even tell. And also the whole city's fake. It's amazing. So when you get to that level, it's just what you can do is just stunning. And then also, would you, on the other hand, prefer to go entirely practical? Do you like the puppets? Do you like the old school? And also, do you think that those could really be competitive at the box office? So thank you for your question, Matt. And again, thank you for your patience. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories, the viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.